are watching Over the Back Fence, a conversation among neighbors. This is a production of Neighborhood Falmouth. Our conversationalists today include Marilyn Zacks, Jack Easterling, Ken Peel, Marcia Easterling, Laura Sonicson, Mike Bihari, Marion Bihari, and B. Wittenberg. And I'm Susan Laux. I'm the director of Neighborhood Falmouth. Today, this large group is going to talk about a year of Zoom conversation. And as a background, this group started meeting on April 1st of 2020. At that point, we did daily, on the weekdays, gatherings just to fend off the isolation of the pandemic. And after a month, we moved to 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then more recently, we've moved to twice a week. And this has been kind of an amazing experience, I think, for many of us. And I think what I would like to do is periodically through our conversation, I'd like to give you some of the topics that we've talked about, just so that you hear a list. Good. So I'm going to start for maybe about a minute or so and point out these topics. We've talked about gardens you love, public or private, other times of privation like World War II or 9/11 or the polio epidemic. We've talked about a favorite art museum experience. We've talked about what has not been canceled. We talked about train trips, the bells of Falmouth, cooking as a family history, cookbooks as a family history. Have you ever done your ancestry? I'll give you about 10 more. What's in a name? Painfully learned lessons, blue highways and or long distance car trips, radio programs we remember, cars we have owned, birds at my feeder. So I'll stop with that. I've got, I mean, that's only took us through the end of April or the beginning of May last year, middle of May. So anyways, we can talk about what this experience has been like. We can also talk about any of those topics. No problem if we, launch off into another direction. Ken, you get started.
I'll just jump in. Yeah, it's been an amazing experience getting to know all the people on the screen here after it just seems like forever. That's good or bad. But as we got to know each other better, obviously we're all a bit more relaxed and know the quirks that we all have. But one thing I was thinking about was early on, we used to sort of treat it more like, not quite like a lecture, but we pick a topic and then somebody would sort of do some research about it and then talk about it. And then other people would chime in. But, we were quite sort of positive about having something presented by somebody as an opener to the topic. And as time has gone on, it's become more loose and the conversations are still pretty wide open. We seldom stick to the topic, which I suppose we might do today too. Anyway, just some thoughts from my point of view.
Do you wish that we were doing some presentations? I mean, your Bells of Falmouth, I think.
Yeah, that was very good.
Fantastic. I mean, that's wonderful.
Sure.
And do you have a preference one way or the other?
I don't know. No, I think the free sort of free way of thinking is a better way to do it, really. There were some topics that a lot of people didn't know much about. So we introduced, I remember, I think I talked about old radio programs or something. And obviously a lot of us remember that, but it sort of brought out remembrances when I talked about something. I think that was the one I did. So, as I say, we're more relaxed now. So I kind of like the free discussion approach.
Sure.
I will jump in and say one thing that I have loved about this, similarly in getting to know each one of you. And there are a few that couldn't be here today. I should mention that among our core group, but people have grown up in the cities and in the country, in the US and Canada. People have lost parents and grandparents at an early age. People have had crazy relationships with within their families and siblings, and people have had such an array of experiences, and that's been it's been absolutely wonderful, in my opinion, to hear
Mhm, mhm.
everybody's experience, and they're all kind of what it's like to have a life, right? It's just got bumps and problems here and there, and it's got great joys in other places. Yeah, it's been fascinating. Who else? Jack.
Yes. What you said suddenly triggered something in my mind. And that is when you ask people to speak or even write about their life, what you get is a single sort of stream of events or experiences that have a certain congruency to them. And that's why you follow them through. What was better about this is that each time there was a topic and people looked into their own private experiences and discussed that topic in the light of their own lives. So the picture you have of people is far broader and more varied, and just far richer, really, by virtue of having each of us sort of be dinged by the topic to speak about what our experience with it has been. And I don't think, as I say, I don't think the normal kind of tell me about your life gets you anywhere near this.
No.
Marilyn.
I'd like to follow up on that. It was wonderful for me to gain an insight into our differences and our similarities. I loved hearing from the Canadians.
Yes.
While one thinks our American culture fits everybody, this was a revelation to me about a different way of viewing government and society. And I loved hearing about life on a Canadian farm. It's an experience I had never had, and
Yep.
Jackie gave me insight, and what an interesting life to go from a farm family to a very accomplished woman in the science community. I have a high regard for everybody because in our own way, everybody has accomplished an awful lot and have kept their sense of humanity with it.
Well
The
said.
other thing I enjoyed was the repartee that developed once we felt comfortable enough to be a little raunchy and off color. And that's all. No, we were not going to talk about Mike. Very much a part of living. And it was so easy to share. There was such a comfort that all of us felt with one another. And I think it was just a remarkable year and added a richness and a safety factor to my life. Thanks, everybody.
Nice. So I'm
Thank you.
going to intervene right here and tell you a few more topics that we discussed.
I wanted to just butt in and say
Oh,
that
yeah, please.
she referred to the Canadian aspect of things, which is a little bit foreign, obviously. And there were, three of us, I guess, that kind of represented Canada. And I thought one thing that came out was that Canada is not a unified single place. You get a lot of different opinions, even among these three people, which is interesting. All countries, but sometimes when we look at foreign countries, we think of them as a unity, which they're not, obviously. So,
right, and others in our group, lived part of their childhood in different countries before emigrating to the U.S. Marcy was all over, and as was B in a handful of places. So, yeah, it's fascinating. Okay, I'm going to jump over to our topics list. We discussed your best friend in childhood. What were you doing when the moon landing happened? The town you grew up in. What do you still want to learn, or what was the last class you took? Politics around while you were growing up, healthcare and health insurance, the book that had the greatest impact on you. What is the role of religion or spirituality in your life now? How has it changed? What was your relationship with your parents and grandparents? And tell me about a great concert you have seen or experienced. So I'll stop there. The list, okay, that takes us through middle of June
June. Okay.
last year. Marion,
I don't have that much to add to everyone else because I felt the same way. But when I came on here, I only knew a few people. And over the course of the 14 months, I actually feel like I have become friends with everyone whose face plus
Right.
all the others on here. And that is something that I will treasure for a very long time, even when we get to a point where we may stop this. It has been a real honor and a privilege to me to find out all of the little nuances of the people that you see and those that are not here. So I actually have to thank you, Susan, for
Yes. Yes.
starting this and knowing that we didn't know that this has continued. And I feel, as I said, very close to every single person on the screen who I did not know in April of 2020.
Yeah.
nice,
So
nice. Marcia,
Very much so.
I echo exactly what Marion said, but I had known everyone on the screen or been in touch with everyone on the screen through one means or another, but not in, we didn't know each other in any depth. And how much you learn about each other this way, that it might take years to learn about each other otherwise. I think we all began knowing something about each other and having great respect for each other and appreciation for each other for what we knew of what many of you have contributed to this community and to ones that you worked in before. But now we have this wonderful sense of knowing each other in a way that is unusual. And I think it's especially unusual the older you get, because people tend to have their close friends from years. And so they don't really develop a very
Don't make new ones.
relationship with other people. And this has really been amazing, and treasure it.
yeah. You know, one thing that I think is really great about this has been all of these topics, because I mean, if you just put a group together and just said randomly, let's chit chat,
No.
you might be talking about the weather, you might be talking about the weather, and you might be talking about the traffic, and you might be talking about the weather. And, you know, having a way, it just gave us different roads under which to know one another, you know, and it gave you a chance to tell your best stories, you know, and maybe we still should have a session about some of the great stories you haven't told. But I think I mean, I love being able to have a reason to call up a certain memory. And I've really loved being able to relive it and share a memory with people who haven't heard it before. And maybe I haven't shared it in a long time in my other world. So having all these topics, I think has given us a context for these discussions that really let something magical happen too. And the fact that everyone just kept showing up, and
Yes.
that people were willing to be really honest about things that they dislike, or maybe hardships they faced, or because we have, you know, there have been times where this has been really tender or vulnerable, and it's been quite, you know, funny and boisterous too. So it's been all of those things. Marcia?
Jack and I participated in a Zoom meeting with a large group of former colleagues, and we were all very eager to be in touch, but no one was in charge, and the whole thing was a complete disaster, and it never was tried again. And so
Oh.
really what we have witnessed and experienced here is what
Hmm.
you need to have someone in charge, and you need to have topics to talk about.
Right, right, right.
Karen.
Well, I finally got my audio to work, which is
Good, good, good.
First of all, as you all know, Ken and I moved away a little over 5 years ago, and he passed away 3 weeks before everything shut down. And I was so thrilled when Susan and I were talking. Gosh, it had to be a year ago almost now, and she invited me to join. And I have to be honest, with the events that went over that period of 3 or 4 weeks, I have never felt so alone in my whole life. And so I was so honored to be invited, because I don't live on the Cape anymore. And coming on board, I knew many of you well. I knew some of you not quite so well. And I think I knew almost everyone except Mike and Marion before we left the Cape. And it's just kind of brought me home again. And to share and hear some of the stories, I had heard a few of them, but most of them I'd never heard. And I have to echo what both Marion and Marcia had mentioned. It was, it gave me an opportunity to know some of the people that I'd known for years a little better, and to make new friends. I mean, like Marilyn, I knew of you, but I didn't know you before I got on here. And it was just, it's been a wonderful experience for me. And I look forward to every time I was able to join in. It kind of, Ken and I lived on the Cape most of our married life. We raised our sons there. And so it's kind of taken me back home. I've caught up on a few little things within the community, and it's just been nice. It's been very friendly and comforting to me to be home for an hour, you know, every so often. So thank you very much. I was really happy to be invited, and it's been a wonderful experience for me.
Yes,
Glad that you joined us. And
very
you know,
glad.
one of the things, you know, from a neighborhood Falmouth perspective, we knew that, as we all did, that we were all going to be in our homes, and if we were lucky enough to have another person in our home with us, we would have some companionship there. But there were, you know, it was an isolating year, even if
Yeah.
it was a pair of you, and if it was just one of you, it was, you know, that on steroids. And you know, we put the word out to our neighborhood Falmouth community, and I wish more people had been game to do this, because you know, I sensed that this would be an opportunity. But of course, Zoom was unfamiliar to a lot of people. Technology is not familiar and comfortable for a lot of people. So this ended up being a very self-selecting group. And, you know, some of you, you know, have been on the board of Neighborhood Falmouth, or, you know, part of the leadership. And so we're possibly doing this as a vote of solidarity for the organization to begin with. But yeah, you know, this core that it turned into, this core group of, I think, 13 of us, just it really gelled. And again, I wish more had been part of it, or maybe we would have broken into other groups. If they'd gotten too big, it would have been different. But
Yes,
anyways,
yes.
Marilyn.
Well, I'd like to point out the culmination of this all is we managed to fit 12 of us around a tiny picnic table at the Wittenbergs.
That's right.
Felt comfortable doing that and made room for everybody, which to
That's
me
right.
was symbolic of
Yeah.
the whole thing. And we didn't fuss, and the Wittenbergs provided beverages and fruit.
That's right.
And Mike had an incredible dessert. So we all showed our better selves. I'm not sure what the other side of us is, but I've never seen it with any of you. and we're all friends in the truest
Mhm.
sense of the word.
Yes. Yes.
Sharing some of our really painful stories and having the group empathize and understand. And we were able to reveal ourselves comfortably, which doesn't really happen at cocktail parties.
No.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all.
Absolutely.
Mike,
Yeah, I think an interesting thing is pointing out when we were at the Wittenbergs, if we had done that 3 times a week, sitting around a table like that, the outcome would not have been the same
No.
No.
because the Zoom has allowed, you know, this kind of interaction with all of us. You don't have to, you know, fight for air at a
No.
park or anything like that. So, I mean, for me, it's just been a tremendous comfort. And,
Yes.
you know, looking forward to, you know, now Mondays and Wednesdays, you know, and making, you know, doing my schedule around those. So, you know, I'm
Yes.
less likely to miss something.
No.
And also the ability to share. I mean, it's,
Mhm.
if you look back as we've slowly loosened up, as Ken said, you know, within, you know, the guise of a topic, I mean, what we've shared about ourselves personally, I mean, it's really wonderful.
Mm, mm.
Susan, you said
Cheaper than a
before that,
psychiatrist.
For free.
Susan, you said before about, you know, sharing stories we haven't shared. You know, I could wind up being tarred and feathered, but that would be okay.
All this a bit of group therapy.
Yes,
sort of. And
for free.
Well, it is actually.
yeah, well, and nice to just be able to share your stories and be accepted and understand that those things happen in a context that we understand the context
Yes.
because we've known each other. Jack and then Laura.
Well, I was just going to say that this whole experience caused me to recall so many things that otherwise I can't imagine how I would recall. I'd need some kind of event or person, but in the course of working through all of these topics, I would remember something, and then I'd remember something else, and the next time I'd remember a different thing. And that has been quite an amazing experience. And group therapy maybe is not such a false word for it
Yeah, that's true.
all.
Laura.
Oh, I could repeat what Jack said. I was thinking about this morning, and I have thought about things now that have been in the far recesses somewhere that
Yeah.
never would have come up.
Yeah.
And the acceptance of one's thoughts and opinions and everything like that is just,
Yeah.
I just feel so wonderful about the
Yeah.
whole group and being part of it. And everybody's so eloquent also in expressing themselves. And, you know, we can be silly if we want to and serious if we want to. And I feel like if I had a problem and I wanted an opinion, I could ask all of you at one
Yeah.
time.
Yeah,
you
that's
know.
good.
So
Group therapy.
Excellent.
those are my feelings.
Ken.
I was just wondering how we recognize that the Zoom environment is where it's been so successful, and yet the world goes on, and we're not going to always do it this way. How could you
No.
transfer some of the characteristics we have here to an actual face-to-face group meeting? You know, a psychologist could maybe tell you how to do that, but what is there that we've been able to uncover here that you could use in a face-to-face meeting? Because that's what's going to happen in the future. We can't always be Zooming. Sure, the answer.
Marilyn, you'll have to unmute yourself.
I think we allow ourselves a certain amount of irreverence and yet are very reverent about living. And we can put a sort of humorous aside to some of the very serious stuff that we've encountered. And it's allowed us to evaluate our own lives in the light of other people's lives. And
That's right.
the more I think about it, in a sense, it's been a year of therapy for all of us. It allowed
Yes.
us to get
Yes.
through what would have been an isolating, depressing, horrendous year with laughter. I don't think there has been a Zoom where we didn't laugh about something corny or quirky. And my hat is off to Mary Pat, who seems to encompass an idea of the sacredness of life and also the randomness of it. Each person has brought, really without thinking about it, their philosophy of life into our conversations.
Yes.
And there's a depth to that we sort of have ignored, but it's there.
Well said.
Yeah, agreed. And you made me think, Marilyn, of just also being able to sort of metaphorically walk in someone else's shoes. So, some of your families were perished in concentration camps. Marcia lost her mother at an early age. Marilyn, you've lived through so much of this century, and you guys have seen civil rights things happen. We've gone through medical school with Mike, and through the teaching system with Jack and Marcia, and we've watched Ken fix things that were not meant to be fixed, and the life of Fish Neighbors, and being out in the boat in the Arctic, Arctic, both, either. And I remember Jonathan saying about Bee that she was sitting in front of him in a class, and he saw this redheaded woman, and he said, "This is the woman I want to get to know this woman." And so your stories, and you meeting Martin Luther King Jr., Marilyn, I'll never forget that. And I mean, and your sister Karen, your sister Sally, I mean, my heart is in your sister Sally and you. And so just all of these, being able to live a little vicariously,
Good point.
I don't know, I feel like has made me smarter in a way, or I don't know, it's opened me up in a way. And Ken, to your question about how can this carry forth into human conversation? You know what? I'm not sure that it really can super easily.
I'm not either.
Again, here we are. It's one conversation and we're this close. This is what I like about the Zoom thing. I can hear people. I can see their faces. I can read expressions. That doesn't happen so easily when you're at a big table or where you're spinning around and you've missed something, and one conversation going around makes it easier too. So, but definitely having a topic helps, but that seems like that might feel artificial if you were at a cocktail party and say, "Everyone, we're talking about your childhood best friend, go." And, would just be kind of like, I don't want to talk about my childhood best friend, So anyways, should I read a few more topics?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. LGBTQ 1A. Did you play a sport, an instrument, or perform on stage? Brushes with fame. That meant your own fame, or did you meet a famous person, and under what circumstance? What stories will you want your children and grandchildren to tell about you or your family? Memories of special foods or meals you've eaten. We love talking about food here. Big weather events you've experienced. 4th of July celebrations you remember. Canadians, you can choose a Canadian national holiday. We talked about dancing cheek to cheek, maybe taking your date dancing and what that was like. Memorable summer jobs. I mean, who doesn't just think about Mike at summer camp? Adventures and encounters with the law, stories of parenthood, good or bad bosses, favorite or unusual pets, and memorable costumes or costume parties you went to.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
That takes us through the end of July of 2020. You know, so that's still almost a year ago. Okay, who's next? Any of those, do you remember any of those conversations or remember bits or pieces of something? Ken?
I think one interesting thing is that I think we've actually repeated some. So,
We may have,
I don't know
yeah,
if it's
yeah,
because we've forgotten or whether they're worth
Yeah.
discussing again and we go off on a different angle, which is often the case.
No. That's right.
And we probably
Yeah.
changed the stories along the way.
Yeah.
It usually happens.
Exactly. B, oh, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, one quick thing, doing this, you know, has brought back all kinds of memories and stories, and Marion and I have talked about some of them, but it has sort of made me want to write my memoirs. You know, and
You remember
some
them
of
all.
these things that happened to me that I've really never shared with anybody else. I started doing that a little bit, and I got to the second day of my life. With a picture of the hospital, you know, on that page. So I have about 80 more years to go.
Marcia.
Right. What you need to do is consult Jackie because she had the same problem of getting started. And she has really worked with Michelle, who spoke to Neighborhood Falmouth Group a couple of years ago. And she had already started with this very nice woman. And I still receive, you know, emails from her. And I've been procrastinating doing the same thing for a long time. And I've got to get serious about this too.
Well, you know, I will tell you that I remember from Michelle Beckman, and I'm on her email list as well. One of the things that she said, Mike, was to not get overwhelmed. You pick 4 or 5 stories you want to tell. And start from that and become indicative of your life or a time in your life or whatever. Then after you've gotten those big ones down, if you want to pick a few more, then you keep picking a few more, and that's how you start without getting so overwhelmed. Ken.
I was just going to say, it's too bad Jackie's not on the screen today. As you all know, she's a good friend of mine. I've known her ever since I started Hui in the 1970s. And I have occasionally looked at her document, which is not complete, but in some of the early years, I think she started at the beginning and going to the end, you know, forward in time. I've learned more stuff about that lady. It's incredible. And she's taken it very seriously, obviously, and with good effect. I mean, she has no offspring. She only has her sisters and so on for her family. But that's a great way to go at it. And she's a very intense person to do things really carefully.
No, she is.
If you're here today, she probably wouldn't say much about it, but it's a real interesting work. It's just amazing. But as Susan said to Mike, you may not want to do it that thoroughly, but you can start on little pieces.
Right.
It's a great idea.
Which is what I'm doing, and it's sort of spurred by boxes and boxes and boxes of papers and photographs that I'm going through and getting rid of, and some of that stirs up a memory of something. You know, so I'm trying to do it in blocks. I remember I had talked about working in a Catskill hotel for 4 or 5 years, which was,
I love that.
Made during dancing look like nothing. I really have a lot of stories about that and pictures. So, you know, I'm trying to concentrate on, you know, those kinds of events in my life.
Marcia.
See, it's occurred to me a number of times over the past year that we should really keep a list of all the topics, because many of those could be the beginning of writing stories
Yes, yes.
remembered. So
Well,
that
Susan, you have the
goes
list.
together. And so I think having copies of all the topics really
Yes.
is a good jumping off place for writing. I
Anyone
know
trying to write, yes.
a number of times I thought, as soon as we got off, oh, I should really sit down and write right now. But have I done it? No.
Life intervenes.
B, we haven't heard from you yet today. How have you found doing all of these Zoom calls this past year?
I found it very exciting. I too am writing a memoir
Oh, good.
Good.
from way back and in areas that I haven't covered here. And it's been fascinating to hear all your stories.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Have you started that as a result of these conversations, or were you sort of doing it anyway?
No, I think I've started it as a result of these
So
conversations.
that's very good.
Wonderful.
Great.
Yes,
Well, then
yes,
somebody's gotten started. That's
yes,
great.
that's impressive.
Great. And Jonathan has been writing his, right? Hasn't he?
Yes, Jonathan has started, or he's written one section and now he's thinking about the second section.
Hey, Mary
Hmm,
Pat just
hmm.
joined us.
Oh,
What's
good.
that?
Sorry, I had to do something else this morning and I'm here.
Ah,
So we'll start over. No, I'm just kidding. And
But we have to, we're
That was
almost
me.
done, Mary Pat, but we need to hear from you.
Yes,
Absolutely.
Okay.
very much so.
well, you know what? What I will
I
do
need
is
to know where you are.
give you a moment to get acclimated. And what
Yes.
we have been doing is just talking about what our experience of this group and these calls has been for the past 12 or 14 months.
14
And interspersed, I have been listing off some of the topics that we talked about. So I'm going to jag off and list a few more. We've talked about mentors. We've talked about how do you feel about schools reopening. We've talked about ethics in everyday life. We've talked about civics classes. We've talked about who in history or myth would you like to spend a dinner with. We've talked about you as a volunteer. We've talked about your experience of war in your life. We've talked about immigration or assimilation. And we've talked about learning to drive or teaching someone to drive. Okay, that goes through the end of August last year.
Okay,
And Mary
I
Pat,
want to say something.
yeah, go ahead, Ken.
Say something that I wouldn't have said a year ago, and that is, do we dare give Mary Pat an open mic?
Mary Pat, how has this experience been for you?
I'm amazed by how cohesive the group has become. And it is really fun to hear other points of view. And yet what I find amazing is because we all come from all parts of the North American, geography. It's a real mix. And yet we have all ended up in this town. And I won't say that our opinions are the same, but they are sympathetic to each other.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Every
Mhm.
topic.
Yeah,
So that has been, it has been really lovely. It really is reinforcing why we live here, because
mhm.
it really does have the best of all parts of our society. And we are just like a microcosm, but we've all come at different points in our lives for different reasons. I don't think there's nobody here who was born here. There's nobody in this group that had, and I may be repeating what you talked about in the beginning.
No,
I think it's really been a joyful group at a really bad time.
Good turn.
well said.
Joy.
Good.
Yeah.
True.
Output.
I agree. Ken?
I was just going to add that Mary Pat obviously is aware that Karen is not in this town, you know, but Karen was a big part of getting this whole thing started. Not the
Absolutely.
talk, but the organization. So
Mhm.
she's part of the picture, that's for sure.
The thing itself.
Well, yeah, and I think, you know, this is a perfect time to give Neighborhood Falmouth a shout out. And, you know, Neighborhood Falmouth is the thread that runs through all of us. And that's what, you know, is the gist of starting these things in the pandemic when we knew
Right.
there would be a lot of isolation. And, you know, and each one of you has been involved in the organization one way or the other, but this is such a solid and such a sweet and caring organization. It's pretty great. Marcia and then Mike.
You know, I'm sure all of us can think of members of Neighborhood Falmouth whom we've gotten to know through volunteering and whom we would wish had joined this group too.
Yes, yes.
There's
many.
Yeah.
marvelous members that I've met driving them here and there, and we always talk about stories when we drive together. And I've just thought of some whom we've lost, whom I just wish
Yes, a
someone
lot.
had been here and been a participant.
Mike and then Marilyn.
Yeah, Susan and I met last week with Mike Kasparian from the chamber. And it was interesting hearing his point of view and the business community's point of view of the organization. He said all he hears is wonderful, wonderful things about the organization. He said he's never heard anything negative. And he said we're very highly respected. And then, of course, he gave the important kudos to Susan.
Good.
How beloved she is in town, you know, and her connection to the organization. So it really felt good to hear someone, you know, who's, you know, knows the town and knows everyone in the business community to say that about us. It was great.
Nice. Marilyn.
Well, others should know about that, Mike. Should be
How long
known
have we
through the
been up
organization.
running? What was the date of the inception of the group?
We
April
launched,
1st, 2020.
we actually, April 6th.
Oh, I'm sorry, of Neighborhood Falmouth.
Yeah.
It was April 6th or 8th, Karen,
It was April 6th when we launched services.
And what-
2009.
2009.
So that we've been around and have shown our stability.
Right.
And we're an asset to the community.
Yes.
Yes. More than a decade.
Yep.
Well, maybe someday we'll have a session about Neighborhood Falmouth and any things that we could be doing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Marcia.
good idea.
I have a question for Karen. Karen, what was the last year that you and Ken were interviewing volunteers for Neighborhood Falmouth?
Yes.
2006, no, wait a minute. I got to get my comings and goings better. 2014.
That's
2000.
when I started. Yeah,
Mhm.
also April of 2014. Yeah, so we have almost reached the end of our hour. And you know, I'm not even going to continue with, well, you know, I look at this topics list and things jump out at me. Here's one. Grammar Nazi. Would you, words you love, favorite proverbs, finding the right word. And transformation, people who transform themselves. I mean, this is great stuff. I want to talk about these all over again. I think
Yep.
it's great. So
Have a second round.
I'm definitely, you know what, I was telling some girlfriends about this and about our photo that was in the Enterprise or going to be in the Enterprise. And they said, you know, you could make $1 million on this if you had an app and put out these topics for people to have. And I was like, how do I do that? I would love to make $1 million. And
Yeah.
we have this list of all these topics, which I will definitely email to all of you today.
Please do.
I just think, you know, and maybe what we do is, you know, sometime if the time is right, the timing is right, we grab one of these topics and talk with our families about them or talk with
Yeah.
friends about them. with my girlfriends, this was a while ago when we were having Zoom calls at the beginning of the pandemic. And I said, oh, we had a great talk. Maybe we should have a topic some night. And I said, one thing we just talked about in my Zoom group, meaning this group, was about our first car. And they said, oh my God, my first car was blah, blah, blah. I mean, we didn't get to say, yes, we'll talk about it. Everyone started. And then I couldn't stop everyone because they were busy talking about their first Pinto, which mine's the first Pinto. So anyways,
So I
yeah,
wonder if,
go ahead, Ken.
and I keep coming back to this, how do we can extend it or make it different? I mean, this group is very cohesive and what's the expression? You can never go home, it's hard to reproduce.
You
But
can't.
could we try again somehow to start another one within Neighborhood Falmouth? The trouble is a lot of the members are, technically challenged, so that's not so easy, but
No.
it seems like, what we've got should be able to be replicated somehow. I don't know.
Somewhere.
Mary Pat and then Marcy.
I also think, I think it would be great. I think in person, it's tougher. I think the fact that the intimacy,
We talked about this.
the screen backgrounds for each bookcases and, China paintings, whatever it is, has been, it pulls you together faster. You feel like you have a better understanding of the other people in the group. Until you put up the old CBC, whatever test pattern. Again, you're showing your age.
Yeah,
Marcy.
we all do.
It occurred to me just now that something like this could be replicated, for example, among my classmates from college.
Yes.
We're fewer in number these days, and we are all thinking back over our lives. And I just thought, that would be a great way to bring a group of classmates together now and then, not as frequently as we have, but still periodically over these next years.
Mike.
Yeah, I did that with my high school class. We had a reunion, and then the woman that I had worked with on the reunion tried to put together a Zoom thing, and it fell on me, which was fine. So I set it up, and we had about 20 people or 15 people on there. And it was nice, although most of us haven't seen each other in a long time, or at the last reunion. It did create some bonding. So, for example, one of my former classmates who wound up being the chairman of cardiology at Yale Medical School is a poet and a published poet. And he just sent this little group, a link to his new book with his poems, and they're absolutely wonderful. So, he was a snot in high school. He's still a snot, but I feel better about him because of, the poems.
Don't say his name. We're on.
And his wife, who was, the most popular girl in school, he was the most popular boy. She turns out to have been on the board of one of the villages in Connecticut.
Oh,
wow.
So, and she looked at our website, and she sent me a note about what a great website it was. So, just that one session made some connections.
Made something happen.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And maybe
The world becomes smaller, and it's really interesting.
Yes.
We can keep stretching out and meeting new people, but also pulling in people from the past.
And it makes me think that, doing something with a topic with people that a little bit, or you have something in common with, is easier than if you were to try and do this with people well, in which it might feel a little stilted or artificial or something.
Yeah.
So anyways, it has been a great year, and we have experienced something really terrific. And thank you for doing this journey with me. And
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And so
Thank all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Group hug.
Yeah.
So I am
Made it
going
go.
to end this by saying you have been watching Over the Back Fence, a conversation among neighbors. And this is a production of Neighborhood Falmouth. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.